Okay. Thank you for coming here. My name is Alex Gaber with Alcatel-Lucent. Alcatel-Lucent obviously makes all this 4G LTE equipment that powers these carriers across the globe. After Marco here kind of gave you the big overview of what all this is, what is all this stuff, I'm going to hear kind of from Alcatel-Lucent how we are answering kind of that last question there, which is how do you now take advantage of this stuff? What are the tools out there? How do you get access to these APIs for the carriers and really start to build the apps that take advantage of all this new technology that's now available via the phones? So just a little bit of background on myself. I came from a cross-platform company, RoMobile. I've also worked at Mashery, previously with Software Development Tools Company, and then previously with Microsoft. So a lot of experience in the cross-platform mobile app development space, as well as Android. So I'll kind of thread that in here as well. Differences between developing native versus the cross-platform tool that is out now being provided to the developer community to build on top of the LTE networks. So obviously the big challenge there as a developer is all the different platforms to develop for, and then we've got all these new things available to us. We've got location, so you can now make an API call and say get for this phone number, and it'll return back the location. So you don't actually have to use the device's GPS and use down the battery life to get that device's location every time you want to make a location request. So that's one example of a use of the APIs that the carriers are now providing to you. And you can actually get access to some of these today, but I'm going to talk about where that's kind of going and how some of these carriers are hopefully going to start working together so that it'll all, and some projects that are actually happening so you can make your app for one that'll write once and run across all the carriers. But things like the address book, SMS, also carrier billing, so you don't have to get taxed by the fees that the app stores hold on you. Using the carriers, there are initiatives there as well to do in-app billing that go through the carrier API, so that the charge shows up on their cell phone bill, and the developers get that money back from the carriers instead. So one product that Alcatel-Lucent actually acquired about almost a year ago now was a cross-platform mobile app development framework called OpenPlug, OpenPlug Studio. It works for Android, iOS, and Windows Mobile in Symbian. It's really designed for global apps. It's actually based out of Europe, so there's a lot of usage all over the world with this Studio, and it is a single IDE. It's basically the Eclipse IDE with libraries built in that let you then build for multiple platforms at once. So it's just a UI. It's just a app framework, just like PhoneGap, Roads from mobile, Appcelerator. Using those, or using like Sencha and PhoneGap, it's comparable to that. Question. Great question. So actually, OpenPlug uses native UI components. So I'll show a demo here near the end, and I'm actually going to show you using the native UI components. Just to make it, the simplest example of that is that Android phones all have a back button. iPhones do not. So when you compile an app using OpenPlug, your iOS version will have a back button. Your Android version will not have a back button in the UI. And it is now free. Since Alcatel-Lucent acquired the company, they took it and made it free to the world, so developers can use it. And so it's free to go to openplug.com and download it. Exactly. License is free. Go use it, make money, use it to build apps and make money, and you keep it all. Yep. So yeah, so just background, OpenPlug Studio is cross-platform. You use actually ActionScript for the scripting language, and then JavaScript as well. All the views are done in XML and CSS. So it's super simple to kind of get started with it. It does also support native extensions as well. So I built an augmented reality app. I had to do native extensions for Android and iOS using Xcode and then Eclipse separately. But for standard most apps, you can just simply use all the one tool itself. And then also, it's just getting that native UI. So that was a great question. That's really the main difference here with OpenPlug Studio is it leverages the native device UI components. So there's no performance overhead of a compiled in runtime or any extra graphics that it's being brought in for the buttons and so forth. It's leveraging the native UI components. So these are just some quick samples here. It's been used for location-based apps to grab location. It's been used for graphically intensive apps. So there's actually an app for InStyle. It's a women's magazine owned by Time. That was built with OpenPlug. Very popular and very, very graphical. A lot of the apps that I've seen kind of using the cross-platform frameworks, you sacrifice a little bit on the UI, or just takes that much more effort to make it look that streamlined. But OpenPlug makes it really easy because it's all just JavaScript, XML, and CSS. Makes it very, very easy to make these apps look very nice. So just really quick here and on the technical stuff, it's all XML-based CSS, ActionScript, JavaScript. It also acts as a plugin for Adobe Flash Builder as well, so you can install it as a plugin for that, or you can download a standalone IDE, which is just Eclipse bundled with our libraries. It gets you access to all the device OS APIs for the location, the camera, the contacts, really any of it that, but again, we'll talk here in a second about leveraging the network now to get things like location. Supports REST and SOAP services, so I'll talk to you in a minute here about the newer versions of OpenPlug are actually going to include code snippets that will be for the carrier APIs built in. So getting the location, instead of having to get GPS, it'll actually have a code snippet there for you that says here's how to do that using the carrier's API to, again, save battery life for these apps. So the toolkit, you can download it at openplug.com. It's a fully contained SDK in an Eclipse plugin. One of the coolest things is that if some of you have Windows computer only and you struggle just at least simulating iOS apps, and you may or may not have access all the time to a Mac computer, it does have a Java-based simulator as well as part of the tool. So for Windows development, it's cool. You can kind of quickly look at your Android and your iOS version. And alternatively, sometimes the Android simulator is kind of slow to load and kind of difficult. It's got one of those built in. So it just kind of helps accelerate your app development, testing it, looking at it really quick. You don't have to load up the simulator every time. So here's a use case we're doing actually in France right now with the 3 top telcos there. And I'll mention other ones we're doing with US-based ones as well. But what we're doing is taking all of their APIs and aggregating them and creating a meta API for developers to build apps in France that say get location. And it's going to then do that across whatever carrier it is. So it won't matter that if it's going to Orange or SFR, it'll just get that device's location based on the triangulation from the cell towers that it already knows. So that's kind of one of the initiatives that Alcatel-Lucent is doing to kind of make life easier for developers to leverage these types of APIs that will soon be available as 4G LTE becomes more towards 100% based on what Marco showed you. It's still not fully there yet, but as that gets there, these meta-level APIs will be in existence for you. Other things that I want to mention too is things like the wholesale application community is trying to create a global carrier billing API so that you can just bill in your apps and do in-app billing with just one API that'll work across all carriers across the globe. So that's, I think, whackapps.com is their website. But it's a wholesale application community. It's not fully, I think it's about to be launched, but all the biggest carriers in the US are on the project. And so that's something Alcatel is actually also actively helping to make life easier for developers, again, to take advantage of these APIs. So the next part is a demo, actually. So this here is the Eclipse IDE, and this is, I'm going to quickly, I pre-recorded this here just to show you. So that you're looking here is the view code for the main page. Okay. And so right here it's just showing this is a UI catalog here. So I'm going to show you, this is kind of we give you a lot of sample apps built in. So this is just the view for that UI catalog here. And then it's going to go ahead and choose the device and then run the simulator. So it loads up right away, super quick. You don't have to wait for it like you do on the Android one. And you can play around with your app, test it out. And that's just kind of in the tool now. So now I took this app here, and I'm just going to quickly show you this same app in the Android simulator. So here's the Android simulator. And so here's that same app now. just install the APK file, and you can see it running here in the Android simulator. As you know, the Android simulator can take a little longer to load. So here it is. So just to show you some samples here. So what's nice is this tool, this SDK, has all these things built in for you. So accelerometer, gyroscope, native device components. The code's already there for you. So you can kind of use this UI catalog we give you to pull these out and use these code samples and pop in your applications. But some things like popovers and little stuff, the framework contains all that code for you already. So you just reuse that. It'll be simple. And so there is like location in here and things like that. And so in the newer versions of OpenPlug, it's going to include carrier API calls in these libraries, just to make it super easy for you to pull these into your apps and take advantage of 4G. One thing I want to mention, there's a bunch of questions about QoS. So one thing we're working on is the simplest example of QoS would be like, you have like a video streaming app, and what it would just be would be a pop-up and say, which data rate do you want to download this at? Do you want to download it at 120 kbps, or do you want to download the small version or the large version? So it really puts the question of QoS into the consumer's hands, so because they own how much data they're consuming. So as the app developer, you can let them choose how much data they're going to be consuming, and that's kind of the biggest concept of the QoS. So it'll be QoS aware as well. So if there's a data rate or throttling on their account too, it'll adhere to that. But from the consumer and developer perspective, that's kind of the simplest example of just letting the consumer choose how much data they're going to consume when they choose to stream that video. So let's go to the next one here. So this is just the iOS simulator. And this is just showing you here, I'm in OpenPlug again. I just built it for iOS. It's the same app, but you'll notice here the UI is different. So it's leveraging the native device UI. So that was the accelerometer here. Here's those popovers, same ones you can see as I just did in the other one in Android, but it's got the iOS consistent look and feel. So one thing that's always important is for the user experience, if they're an iPhone user, they kind of have this expectation of the shiny blue at the top. If they're an Android user, often the apps have, the native stuff is a dark background. So they're just used to that kind of look and feel. So that's a big kind of thing here with OpenPlug is maintain that consistent user experience across the apps that they have with their normal device, so it doesn't look like some totally different app, and make them feel comfortable with it. Okay. And then I just did two other quick examples here of some graphical apps. So this is another simple one here. Again, this is the view. This is just going to show some graphics with some popovers. And a lot of this sample code we give you as well as part of the build. So here you can see I can select the different devices here to use for my simulator. And so, with the fragmentation of Android, obviously you have to support all those different resolutions. This one here is loading up for just 480 by 800. And just be more of a graphical app just to show you the tool being used for that. And again, this is the Android UI here. And that'll wrap up. And we'll do the next one here, which is just going to do it for iOS. I did it for iPad. So basically, you would just drag and drop. You just create your different graphic files for these different images and put them in the tool. It makes it super simple. And then here it'd be for iOS. So it's a little different, right? It doesn't load it up right away. Nice thing with the simulator here, it gives you, again, it's really quick and easy. I can resize it and then just view. There's the same thing, but it's using kind of more an iOS look and feel. And I can see the planet information there. And click off, and that's really it. So these are just some examples of apps built, but the main important thing is that this tool, it's a free tool for developers, and more and more it's going to be including the existing code to build on top of 4G LTE and make it easy to get location based on the device location from the network. So a lot of these things, carriers are concerned about consumers having their batteries dying and then blaming the carrier. But it's often because the app's pinging GPS every half hour or pinging it too frequently. And carriers are going to start locking down on that as well because they're aware they're getting the support calls from consumers. People are walking their stores. So that's what we're really trying to help is provide these tools so we can help developers make better apps that leverage the network, make consumers, network, and the developers happier and make everyone more money. Okay. So that's it. And yeah, so let's open questions. Again, developer.openplug.com is the site. You can download it for free and check it out. But go ahead on the right here. The accuracy of the location. So, so that's a great question. So GPS itself, like as I understand GPS, we as like developers and we when we query GPS or on devices, it's it's within like 100 meters or something, right? And that's actually as I understand, it's actually governed by the U.S. government for how accurate the GPS can be. So like military can pinpoint you within a foot to GPS, but just the government just doesn't allow the GPS coordinates to be that precise for the general public for security and their own safety. So it actually will be more, it'll be, comparable, and it depends where you are. If you're in a highly populated San Francisco downtown where you've got 50 cell towers within a mile of you, the triangulation will have that much more precision than if you're out in the middle on the highway or in the middle of nowhere, and it's trying to triangulate you between fewer towers. So it'll vary depending on where you are. But it would be comparable to using GPS if you were asked for the GPS location. Is the power usage as much as GPS with using a location API for the carrier? So no, the power consumption is far lower because all you're making is an API call to carrier.com/API/get phone number as a parameter. Get location, and it's going to respond to you with that location. So it's a single API call, so it's just transferring data over the network. The GPS is actually going to fire up the GPS radio on the device. If the person has Wi-Fi enabled location services turned on, it'll use the Wi-Fi to ping local Wi-Fi towers, and that uses a lot of power. So the whole goal with location-based services to the network is to lower that power consumption. Sir. Yeah, okay, so the question is, do you have to have a Mac computer to create the iOS apps? OpenPlug does actually create the Xcode project, so you get the actual Xcode project. So, no, you don't, but to install that anywhere, you'd have to have a jailbroken device to do it. So you need to then go into a Mac using Xcode to do the provisioning and play by Apple's rules with the UDID to get that Xcode project installed anywhere. But if you had a jailbroken phone, it would you only needed OpenPlug to install it. Correct. Yes, yeah. So OpenPlug's an Apple partner, so they get, as I understand, Apple only sends out, beta device or early devices about 2 weeks before they're announced and released. So it's not much lead time, but we do get as much lead time as possible. And with that, that's definitely one thing that OpenPlug. That's the goal, and that's part of the whole product is to be as quick to market as we can with that. So as the new versions come out, yes, and like supporting iOS 5 is something we're working on too. Yep. Yeah. The question is, he's saying AppCelery right now has better like UI widget support for iOS, but not really that much yet for Android, and they're working on that. And so with OpenPlug, we're actually really 50-50 on iOS and Android. Right now the OpenPlug tool only supports Windows 6, not Windows Phone 7. So that's just something to we really OpenPlug's moving with the market for smartphones. And Alcatel-Lucent, we talk to the carriers and ask them what do they want to see and what do they want to help developers with, and it's just those two right now, iOS and Android, but it's 50-50, and that's like that UI catalog I showed you, that's got pretty much all the UI elements in that one little app, so it's got all the sample code for that there to make it super simple, and it's 50-50, it's the same for both. Yes, sir. Oh, an audio, okay, so you want to, in your app, have a little button, make a sound recording app. Yeah, that would be in the tool itself. The native extension stuff is really only for like certain things that are really, really kind of messy, like augmented reality kind of is leveraging a few things, but most standard device APIs are available in the tool. So camera, audio recording, audio playback, video playback, getting the contacts, using the GPS if you wanted to. There are libraries for all that code and classes for it in the tool in the SDK. So the question is, what's the motivation for Alcatel-Lucent to provide this free product? Like, why would Alcatel want to do this? Why did And the question that I've asked is why did Alcatel buy OpenPlug? What is the reason? Well, the reason is, and it's a great question. And so the reason is really, kind of as you saw Marco's presentation, he kind of explained the state of the world of 4G LTE, and here's what's happening, and here's all, the freeways are being built, and it's going to enable all these, different, things to now exist. Suburbs and In-N-Out Burger can now exist. And so that kind of kept getting asked of Alcatel-Lucent is, how are you going to enable these applications? How are you going to enable developers to know what the heck is going on with the carrier APIs? I've signed up for the Verizon API myself, and it was like, 10 documents with digital signatures going through the process. I mean, it took hours to sign up for their API. And so some of the other carriers are like that too. So it's not an easy click here, give your email address, and we'll give you an API key, and you can start building sandbox API calls. So what we wanted to do is really enable apps and show the carriers and work with the carriers to enable those apps too. Other initiatives we're working on with carriers are along these lines where, everyone's always annoyed with the carriers, are getting calls all the time right now from consumers saying, my battery's dying, I need a new phone. Well, it's not your battery. You've installed too many apps. Some of those apps may have, they're leaving services running. Most, 95% of consumers probably don't know how to install that, app, Juice Defender, or one of those apps that's going to control your power consumption. And so what Alcatel is working with the carriers to do is to help the application ecosystem around whatever device it is, Android, iOS, WebOS, who knows, right? We want to make sure that the consumer experience is good and that they're happy with their carriers, and that the carriers can provide the level of customer service and privacy controls and security that the consumers demand. And so our goal with OpenPlug is to really facilitate better development to help leverage the network carrier infrastructure better. Because when the iPhone doesn't work in a certain big city, a tech kind of hub in the world, who gets blamed? Is it, you're calling up AT&T and you're angry because your iPhone's dropping calls. Who are they going to call and get angry with because they're getting bad calls? So there's that kind of chain, and that's why the better apps that are out there, the better the consumer experience, the bigger win for all these people in this chain here. And that's why Alcatel-Lucent is powering all these carriers. Other things we haven't really talked about today are like femtocells with geofencing. We sort of have automatic check-ins right now with Google Latitude can do automatic check-ins for you, but it's going to suck your battery life down. Femtocells would then allow maybe a femtocell location would then ping when this device phone number or device ID gets within this femtocell geofence, then ping to this server and let them know that they're there, and then do this. So for very localized couponing, that would work. But if you do that with using the device GPS, you're going to suck down the battery. So these are the kinds of things that Alcatel wants to help the carriers provide better cell phone, smartphone experience to the consumers, and we're trying to tie in better, to help expose these APIs. Alcatel works with the carriers to expose these APIs. We want to make sure they're consumed in the right way. Have things like certification programs. Maybe on the horizon too for the carriers, where you can have your app can get not just certified by Apple to be on the App Store, but it can get certified by AT&T as well, because they went through their certification process. I've heard of a startup that's doing when an app crashes on the device, instead of just saying app crash error, that pop-up will actually have the developer's email address or phone number, so that okay, call and submit bug. So it'll then do a push bug submission to their Jira system. So hopefully that kind of answers your question of why Alcatel's doing this. And it's really to help developers build better apps and make it easier for developers that want to build good apps and know what's out there to make them better, and really just kind of help that and facilitate that. As we kind of wrap up here, last chances, but openplug.com is the website, so please feel free to check it out. You have to just sign up as a developer. Then you can download the Eclipse IDE, or you can download, and you download one file. It'll ask you if you want to install it as a Flash Builder plugin, or if you want to install it as a standalone, and then go ahead and start playing with it. It runs on Windows and Mac. I just had the recordings on a Windows machine here, but we run it on both. And feel free to play with it, and then that's where to kind of keep an eye on what the carriers are going to be doing. Alcatel is working with several carriers, not just the French ones we showed there, but several carriers around the globe to bring in their APIs into the tool. We are considering possibly releasing OpenPlug, as some carriers are looking to maybe white label it and say, here's our developer tool for cross-platform development. We've got a lot of code built in here to access our new 4G LTE APIs and build those into the tool. If nothing else, just to help you and learn how to build these apps and take advantage of those carrier APIs and make it simpler and easier to get on board. And that's kind of what the tool is. All right, thank you very much.